Alrighty. Welcome back, guys. I know it's been a while. I'm gonna close my door real quick. Good kitty. So, today I decided I'm going to do something. So, the first game I ever made is a game called Into the Deep. I'm going to pull it up on itch.io right now. And what I want to do is, it's been probably 6 or 7 years since I made this game. I want to make a sequel to this game and live stream the entire process. So everyone gets to see how to make a game from start to finish. We're going to be doing marketing, we're going to be doing production, we're going to be doing programming, art, all of it. So this is the game right here. As you can see, I had beautiful menu design. I went ahead and found some old notes, which we'll go over in a second. Today we're going to try and figure out the design. The whole concept of this game is you are a submarine in the deep, dark ocean. And it's dark. I really like games that play around with light systems, so it's hard to see. You control a flashlight with your turret, which you can look around. You can pick up health. You have 2 abilities. You have a boost ability, and then flash projectile. As you can see, I never actually made any good art for the flash projectile, but it works. This game was originally created when I was following Blackthorn Prod's top-down adventure game. Now, I was a little bit more advanced than what the course was aiming for. They were aiming for complete beginners. So I decided to add a whole bunch of custom code to it. So their course won't allow you to create something quite like this, but you'll be able to make something pretty nice and similar. I'll link that down below. So the concept of this game is you're a submarine lost in the ocean. Your job was to retrieve, minerals or ore of some type. Never got added to the game, but it was kind of my headcanon. You were exploring the ocean, trying to find resources. In one scenario, I had like a desolated wasteland on the surface, and corporations were sending subs down to try and get a rare mineral, and they discovered that the oceans were as uninhabited as they had assumed. Let's look at some of my own old notes. Let's see here. So this was my oldest note that I could find. So this is note 4. So you can see it's June 24th, 2017. So from a very long time ago. This was this note. This was the oldest note I could find. At that time, I had called the game Deep Down. The core concept was salvage. When you die, your subs remains are left and can be reclaimed or looted for XP. Stretch goal, I wanted to have like some sort of visual indicator of how many lives you have done. So I wanted a roguelike of some type. I'm pretty sure at the time I was playing Slay the Spire a lot. And that was inspiring me a bunch. And I think I had this game set up as a multiplayer game because I had bases on corners of maps. We ended up scrapping like all of that because at the time I just wanted to get a project done. So what I'm thinking, this is what I'm currently thinking for this design. I'm thinking the core concept is live streaming this, which I've already talked about. The game concept is going to be a sequel, but how it was originally imagined. I want to do Slay the Spire meets Mech Warriors meets Hades and meets Transistor. I want the story to be told mechanically. This is something I want to take from Transistor. One of the coolest parts of that game was how enemies, you incorporated them into your kit. So when you defeated someone, you could learn knowledge from them. And as you used that ability that you learned from them, you unlocked more lore about the enemy that you defeated. It was a really interesting interweaving of mechanics and narrative. I want to find a way to work something like that in. From Hades, I want to work in the polish and the game feel of that game. That game feels amazing to play. Probably one of the best games I've ever played as far as game feel. So I want to try and incorporate that. Mech Warriors is a game that some of you might not have heard of. So I'm going to pull it up right now. So Mech Warriors is a franchise about big stompy robots. And the coolest thing of this game is the customization. So let me find, this one should work. This is not quite what I'm looking for. Give me a second. That's a little bit. We'll do Mech Warrior 5. That's the more recent game. Hard point. Here we go. This is kind of the concept. So you have this big stompy robot, right? The robot is broken down into different parts. You've got your right torso, your left torso, your arms, your center torso, your head, and your legs. And each of these places had different hard points. So different types of guns could be slotted into different points. And Goblin, get down. Goblin, down. Why are you such a pest? So you could slot in different types of guns, different types of ammunition into different parts of your mech. So for example, you could have a big cannon in your right arm and then a laser beam in your left arm and then leave your torso open. Or however, there's tons of different builds and stuff. It's a really fascinating system. I want to implement something like this where you can customize your submarine and you can do all sorts of different things with it. The next part is Slay the Spire. What I think is the coolest part of Slay the Spire is actually not the card game mechanics. It's the map mechanics. So Slay the Spire map. So I want a system set up like this, where you start off, you can choose where you want to dive, and then as you progress, this is basically charting your course across the ocean. And at the end of the progression is a boss of some type that you have to fight. So that's the element I want to take from Slay the Spire. So given all that, we need to put together a game plan. So normally, after I have a rough idea of the game, which is what we've got right now, we have a rough idea of how we want it to look. We need to go ahead and iron out some of the details. And for that, we're going to look at some of my old notes. So let's see, what do we have here? I want to have preview of enemies beneath you in the form of shadows. So one thing that was very interesting about Into the Deep is, and you can see it when I play here, there are, actually I'm going to pull it up in Unity. It'll be easier to show it in there. But essentially I have layers. So rather than progressing further into a dungeon, you're actually progressing deeper into the ocean. It's opening. So, what I want is, imagine this. You're in a submarine, you're in the shallows, alright? So, beneath you yawns like a deep maw, a deep trench that you could go into. As you dive into it, you see seaweed start to grow up, or you see giant rock formations. And each level of these rock formations, you see a little bit more each time. Where is my global light? There you are. We're going to turn up the intensity a little bit so we can see it more clearly. And we'll turn off the canvas. And then we'll turn off our other canvas. So we have two. Alright, so what I want are slices of the game. So as you descend further down, we'll have more and more slices of the game. And you can see I did make some new art somewhere that never made it to the itch version. I think I made some new art for the enemies as well. If I go to my prefabs, enemies, melee enemy, see I've got this fish art for him. I've got like more puffer fish for the ranged. I've got this cool summoner enemy. So I've done one art pass, but I think I'm going to go in a different art direction for the second game. But anyways, I want to have layers. So imagine this seaweed cluster, right? In this layer, you see the top of the seaweed, and then once you defeat this level and kill all the enemies attacking you here, or survive for long enough and dive deeper, you're going to see the middle section of the seaweed stalk. And then dive deeper, you'll see the bottom of the ocean floor and the seaweed growing out of some rocks or something. So the idea is, as you go through levels, you see more and more of the levels. And you could have cool things like runes or giant wrecks that span multiple levels or what have you. Like there could be really interesting visual elements like that. So I want to incorporate some form of that. If we look at some of our other notes, actually let's start writing this stuff down. So we want there to be sliced levels of geometry and environment, i.e. top of seaweed on early level, middle in next level, root in next level, so on and so forth. So it tells a story environmentally. This allows us to tell a story mentally. Alright, 2. I want to keep the enemies that I currently have, but have more enemies. So currently, we have an angler type fish that lunges at the player. In this case, it's a fish that rams the player. So if we look at our fish right here, let me turn off our mini-map icon. We've got this guy. He's got these 2 little angler things that emit light, and he rams you with this crust, this like grafted on metal at the head of this fish. We also have a pufferfish fish that shoots acid at you. We have a spawner that grows little babies in these eggs on its back that come running after you. They're baby versions of this guy. So those are the fish that we currently have. So we want to keep all of the current fish, but we want to expand on this. And this is where you guys could be helpful. So please comment in the comments below. I'll also set up a poll on the channel if you have any cool ideas for the fish. So it'd be cool if we could come up with some different ideas. That's the other advantage of making this live, is you guys will get to participate in the design and making of this game. Alright, next. This was old when you were playing as a pufferfish, which is not the route I ended up going, because I ended up going the route of the submarines. So what other ideas we got here? We've got a splitting fish. That could be interesting. So you kill it and it becomes 2 fish. Egg clusters could be a spawn zone. So let's copy these in as potential ideas. Giant jellyfish have to hunt down and heal for speed boost. That could be interesting. Stealth mode could be interesting, like an option to the lights that you have on will determine the fish's audio or pickup range, though that might not make sense depending, because a lot of the times the fish in the oceans, like the deep oceans, don't really hunt via light. A lot of the times they'll hunt based off of like motion. So possible. I'll put 2/ and do possible. So this is the process I do when designing a game. If I have old notes, I'll look at those. If I don't, I'll just brainstorm ideas. I definitely want to include this part. When you die, you leave your corpse and something about how you died for future runs. I want it to be so that you can loot your old body. That would be super cool. And I don't know if that's been done in a roguelike before. Now, you might not have everything left. People might have scavenged you by the time you get down there. So there might only be 1 or 2 items that you're able to get from your old corpse. But it'd be really cool if you could get that. Alright, on to the next document. This was back when I was calling the game Consumption, and I had 3 different games played out. I wanted to do a war between the fish and the humans, and depending on the game you're playing on each side. We might still do that. We'll see. That's just animation stuff. That's not important. To do. This was a list of to-do stuff that needed to have happen. The next thing we're going to have to come up with are bosses. So currently for bosses, we have a shark boss that rams you. I think it would be cool to have an eel boss of some type. Maybe like a jellyfish. Maybe a crab. We could go the route of like Eldritch Horror, so you could have like crazy abominations, aboliths, those types of things. We could go the route of weird like science, biotech, fusion type stuff. I do think it would be cool to have sentient fish at some point. So I'll do sentient fish, biotech. See what we can come up with that. Alright. So that's all of our notes. So now we're going to look more at our key mechanics. So we want random encounters of 1 of 3 types. We can have combat, rest, which is where we can upgrade or heal. We want to have events. This is non-combat, talking to people. So we want to be able to talk to people in some way, shape, or form. So maybe you run into another explorer or something like that. Let's see, what other type of events we could have. Those are the main events. So you chart a course to the boss. Along the way, you encounter the above things randomly. Alright. We want to have customization as core. Similar to MW, we want to be able to have things like this. We want to be able to have hard points of some type, determines your abilities and weapons. We want to have a chassis, which determines turn speed and not overall speed. We'll do that with an engine, and like hit points. And then we're going to have an engine, which will determine speed. So this is not going to be quite as complex as... Oh, and then we'll have lighting. Determines light levels. So we're not going to have something as complex as MechWarrior or something like that, because I'm not going quite for the sim experience. I still want to have maybe a little bit of an arcadey influence on the game. So things are a little bit more responsive, a little bit less mechanical feeling, but I still want to have robust customization. Our next core point is we want to have polish. So extra effort on polish and game feel. So this is something that's just going to have to be tested a bunch. It's going to take time to nail this down. There's not a whole lot of notes I can do for this. What we can do is keep an eye on things that feel good in other games. So as I play games or as I work on other games or what have you, I'm going to try and maintain a list of things that I know that felt good. For example, in a lot of games, when you hit someone, the camera shakes, and that's a really good feeling. Alright. Next is the story. So we need to come up with some sort of story. I'm not quite sure what we could do here. I'm thinking, well, since you showed up, one of the things we're looking for is ideas for enemies. So the theme is you're in the ocean. You are exploring. I have pulled up right here. This is the original game. So this was the first game I ever made. I want to make a sequel to this game. I'm going to hit play so you can see it. Normally it's a lot darker. It's just easier to see this way. Well, it's just a top-down shooter. May or may not keep it top-down. You have enemies that come in. Right now there's just some basic fish types. So if you can think of any things that could be cool. Currently what we have is a melee fish that rams you. We've got a fish that can shoot spit at you, so like acid at you. And then you've got another guy that spawns in smaller fish that attack you. I could use OpenAI, and we probably will use that some for this project. But also, why not give chat an opportunity to, come up with ideas and influence what this game becomes. The goal with this is to finish the game and stream everything that has to do with game development on it. So design, marketing, production, code, art, all of it. And put it onto Steam. This was my first Finnish game. So I had many other projects before this, but I always abandoned them before I got more than like 60% through. So this is the first game that I count as my first game. So it was the first one that I actually released that wasn't just like a game jam project or something like that. This was like 7 or 8 years ago. And I was following a course for this one. It was a Blackthorn prod course. I added in a whole bunch of custom code because I was more advanced than what the course had then. Alright, so story-wise, I'm going to have to think on this. So I'm going to think on this. If you guys can come up with any cool ideas, that could influence our decision on that. But I'm not quite sure what I'm going to go with that. So we have a decent amount done. So let's go into how we set up Trello and how we set up those types. This into the Deep 2. Alright, all you have to do to get to that string is just log in to Trello. And we're going to come up with some general categories. This will allow us to keep organized while we work on projects. We're going to come up with programming, design, art, and then bugs, doing, and done. And I normally like to put bugs on the other side of done. So we'll add cards as we come up with things to do to our prospective lists, move them into the doing column when we're working on them, and then move them to the done problem when we're done. And if we ever find bugs, we're adding that to bugs, which will eventually get taken out and worked with. So for example, we need to set up character controller. You can add a checklist to any of these by just going to checklist, so like to do. For example, decide how responsive you want it to be, so on and so forth. Another thing that we're going to have to do is architecture, so base architecture. This is going to be how we handle data in our game. In our case, we're going to be using scriptable objects. So what scriptable objects are, if anyone doesn't know, is you create a script. For example, I'm going to go to my class script or class folder here. I have a weapon. And this weapon, I have different types of weapons. And let's say I want like a crossbow or I want a shotgun or what have you. You can make a scriptable object with it, which will allow you to make a object in Unity that you go to create, wave, and then it adds a new one. And then you can just fill in information. This is information that you set in the script. So for example, if I open up this wave script, if you open up this wave script, I've got my array of enemies, I've got my count, and all this stuff to do with waves. So we're going to use this for our data. So that way it'll be easy, just as simple as finding our scriptable object and just changing our information to develop and test things pretty rapidly. So all of our data is going to be handled for there. We have to determine how we want to save data. For now, we can use player press, but we probably will have to come up with a better system for a roguelike. We're going to have to come up with systems. So system-wise, so let's do a checklist for this. We're going to need a system for sub-customization. We're going to have a system for wave spawning. We're going to have a system for AI. We're going to have a system, let's see, what else do we need? We need weapons, abilities. We're going to need anything else. I think this is all the ones I can think of. If I come up with more, we'll add it back to this list. Design-wise, we need to design pretty much everything right now. We're going to start off by just focusing on the character controller. So we're going to do character controller. For art, we need our sub. For now, we're just going to use this new sub art that I designed. We're going to make a decision at some point if this is going to be an isometric or top-down game. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Hit detection is a little bit easier with the top-down game, but it's a lot harder to do things like the seaweed from a top-down perspective if you want it on a slight angle. So that's going to be kind of like up in the air depending on my artistic abilities, which honestly isn't the greatest. That's probably going to be the hardest part about this game for me. And that's all we have to do for setup. So let's get our project set up and then let's get it up on source control. And then we might do a little bit more today. We might not. We'll just see how it goes. So let's create a new project. And then go to core. We will be using the lightweight rendering program. We're going to call this Into the Deep 2. For now, I'm going to put it on my desktop, but that might change later on. And then we're going to create our project. The reason why we want to use the universal rendering pipeline is because that allows us to access all the cool new lighting features that they have in the URP. I say new, they're new as of like 2019. I think 2020, 2021 they moved out of beta. But it allows us to do all sorts of fun light stuff. As well as post-processing effects. So we're going to let that open. Make sure that you have Plastic installed. My icons are currently messed up for some reason, but Plastic SCM is the app that we're going to want. That's Bluetooth. Okay, so the words are accurate. Now we're going to use this to set up all of our stuff for our source control. What source control will allow us to do is if we ever mess up or break anything, we'll just be able to revert to our last version of the project. As far as our submarine, we would like something fairly responsive. So the one complaint I had with the sub in Into the Deep is you can see when I control it. So W and S control a throttle. This is how fast you're going. A and D spin us. But I like this behavior in the map. The issue came to when you were at the edges. So if I'm swimming, here's just a boss guy, we can ignore him. But if I come up to the edge, currently there's a collider and it just stops me and it doesn't feel very natural. What you want to have happen is it turns the ship around so you go back onto the screen. So we might figure out how to do that. Overall, I didn't mind this system. It's a little bit unintuitive. We might, instead of having to hold down W or S to go forward or go backwards, we might just have it purely as a throttle so it sets the speed. This is something that is done in MechWarrior. In that game, the reason is your torso and your legs can face different directions. So you can be moving forward, but it's a first-person game, right? So you're moving forward, but you're looking over here to your like bottom or what have you. It allows for some interesting stuff. We have a null reference because I broke something. Oh, I have my boss set up so it spawns after one wave for testing purposes. And that's what was going on with that. Because I was reworking my boss AI. So we've got it set up. So let's start off by setting up plastic. So we're going to go to Window. We're going to go to Plastic. And we're going to create a workspace. I'm going to call it Into the Deep. You can leave it all set up. I'm going to hit Create Workspace. Going to select everything, and we're going to call this init. This is your initial commit. This is just everything that you created, because by default, there's nothing on it. So after we do that, we're going to go ahead and import whatever art and stuff we want to have. So to make life easy, we've got this project already open. So I'm going to just go to my art folder. I'm going to go ahead and grab the whole folder and drop it in. This way we'll have all of our old art to make our life easy. Could go through and delete some of it. We'll probably do that. But this will just give us some prototype art to start off with. I will include, once I cut this up into a video, this prototyping art file right here. This is what I normally prototype with. In this case, I just have my prior game, so I'm going to use a little bit better looking art. But it's pretty straightforward to do. Let's go ahead and delete the things we don't care about right now. I guess we can use that for now. We don't care about this old puffer art or this old ranged fish art. I have a lot of old art here that got discarded as time went by. Remember, this was 7 years ago, so I've learned a lot about how to make better art over that time. I'm still no great artist by any means. That guy can get deleted. This boss can get deleted. We'll hold on to these Photoshop files for now. We're definitely deleting that menu because it looks awful. We'll come up with something better. Alright, so we've just got some base art set up. We'll set up our folders, so we're going to make a scripts folder. Some people like to call it code. Completely up to you. We're going to have a scriptable objects folder. People have different ways of how they like to organize their stuff. One thing that is useful, so let's say I create we'll just do a script, is let's say this is an enemy. It's useful to do enemy underscore fish. And the reason for this is as long as there's an underscore, if you use the search bar you can identify both words. So if I do fish, you'll see enemy fish came up. If I do enemy, you'll see enemy came up. However, if there was no underscore there, so like for example, I'm going to do enemy eel. If I type in enemy, unless they've changed it, it won't come. Okay, they've made it a little bit smarter. In the past, I ran into issues where it wouldn't discover a partial name like that, and that made it kind of annoying when you had, say, 100 scripts in your project and 3,000 arts, right? Sometimes people will put like the art, the code, the prefab, all that in one folder for the enemy, or sometimes they'll just have like a code folder, an art folder, or what have you. Getting completely up to you. Do note that you don't want to use a ton of folders. So if you're using like 5 folders deep, it's probably too much, because for a lot of these programs, the hierarchy matters. So what I mean by that is the file path name grows with each new folder you do, and for a lot of programs, there's a maximum on your file path. All right. So now we have everything set up, we can go ahead and commit all of our changes. Set up prototype art. And you can see once this is done, if I go to my change sets tab, you can see my change sets, and I can always just revert to a change set if I broke my game somehow. Alright, so our next task, which I'm probably not going to get in today, today's just a short get set up stream, is we're going to be going into setting up our character controller. So I'm going to do a little bit thinking, figure out how I want it to behave, and then we'll dive in with getting our character controller set up and doing some code. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit real quick. I'm going to create an empty, and we're going to call this player. And then, or no, we're going to call this sub. We might want a parent player class. So for now, we're just going to have a sub. And then I always like to keep art and code separate. So I'm going to make a second game object called art. I'm going to add a sprite renderer to it. That's the wrong one. And I'm going to add an animator because I want all my animations to be on my art object. Then on the parent, I will add a capsule collider for now. Again, this system might change because the modular parts of our subs, it might be each different part of our sub will require a different system on it. And then we can just go ahead and put our sub art, this guy, into our thing. And you can see it's huge. The other advantage of separating art and code is I can scale down my art to whichever size I want. So we're going to do 0.2, or we'll try 0.1. No, we'll do 0.2. And then we'll make sure it's at 0, 0. And then we can flip it on the X, so it's pointing forward. And then we will modify our collider to go horizontally, and we'll go like from here to here. And this is just a very basic collider. Again, this is super simple setup. We're going to add a rigid body, so we will probably be using physics. We'll make it so it can't spin on the z-axis, which for us is going to be this way if it runs into something. For now, we might change that again. It's okay if you have to rework code or rework stuff. A lot of the times it's just make some progress, do something. If you have to change it, you have to change it. Don't get paralyzed by trying to be the most efficient, because it's going to be top down or isometric. In either case, we want to set gravity equal to 0. We can handle gravity ourselves if necessary. Then we'll go ahead and commit these changes. You don't have to commit these changes quite as often as I am. I was just doing it kind of more often right now to show the different steps. Normally I'll do it at the start of working and at the end of working. So we'll say this is player sub setup. Alright, I'm excited to get to work on this project. I hope you guys are looking forward to it too. I think it'll be really useful to see a game created from start to finish. And I will see you guys in the next one once I figure out my setup for art and